After 5 years together, my fiancé told me he wasn't sure he wanted to marry me. Then, in front of his friends, he laughed and said, "If you were prettier, I'd marry you." This morning, his mom called me in tears. Dominic and I have been together for just over 5 years, engaged for the past 8 months. We met through mutual friends at a housewarming party, two people who clicked over a shared hatred of IPAs and a love for 90s cartoons. Our relationship moved at an easy, steady pace. We dated for a year, moved in together after 2, adopted our cat Beans in year 3, and got engaged last summer. The proposal wasn't anything extravagant, just a quiet Saturday morning hike to our favorite lookout spot where he nervously fumbled the ring box out of his pocket. I said yes instantly. We set the wedding date for this October and began planning things slowly. Well, mostly me planning, while he nodded and said, "Sounds good" to everything. About 3 months ago, Dominic started making offhand comments whenever we talked about wedding plans. Nothing overtly negative, just little remarks that felt off. When I showed him potential venues, he'd say things like, "That's a lot of money for just one day," or, "Do we really need to invite all those people?" I brushed it off as typical guy behavior, maybe budget stress. Then the replies to my texts got slower. I'd send him caterer options, and he'd respond hours later with something like, "Looks fine," or "Whatever you want." When I asked if he was okay, he said he was just busy with work. His construction company had picked up some major projects, so it made sense. Around the same time, he started hanging out more with his work friend Paul. They'd go for beers after work or watch games at Paul's place. It didn't seem weird at first, just more frequent than usual. But when he came home, he felt distant, always on his phone, less affectionate, not fully there. I brought it up with my best friend Lena, and she chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters. She suggested we go on a date night to reconnect. So last Friday, I made a reservation at a new Italian restaurant downtown. I wore a nice dress, nothing too fancy, just something I hadn't worn in a while. I even stocked the fridge with his favorite beer to surprise him later. But the night was a complete disaster. He was distracted during dinner, barely made conversation, and when I brought up finalizing our honeymoon plans, he dropped the bomb. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this. Not just the honeymoon, but the wedding, the marriage, everything. I was completely stunned. 5 years together, 8 months engaged, and now he was unsure? I asked him to explain, and he started talking about his conversations with Paul, how marriage changes everything, how Paul's brother went through a horrible divorce. The conversation escalated. I was trying not to cry in the middle of the restaurant, trying not to cause a scene while my world was unraveling. We barely touched our entrees. The ride home was tense and silent. Back at our apartment, he said he needed time to think and slept on the couch. The next morning was painfully awkward. We moved around like strangers in a shared Airbnb. He said he was going to meet Paul and some friends at the Rusty Nail to watch the game. I didn't have the energy to argue. A few hours later, Lena called and convinced me to get out of the apartment. We went for coffee, and I poured my heart out to her. She listened and said maybe Dominic was just overwhelmed with everything. Afterward, we wandered through Target, my go-to place for retail therapy. I bought some throw pillows I didn't need and new shampoo because why not? It actually helped. By early evening, I felt calmer and decided to head home. As I pulled into our apartment complex, I got a text from Kylar, one of Dominic's co-workers I'd met at the Christmas party. His message said, "Are you okay?" Things got weird at the Rusty Nail. I immediately called him instead of texting back. He sounded uncomfortable and hesitant, but eventually he told me what happened. The guys were teasing Dominic about the wedding. Paul asked if he was really ready to be with one woman forever. Dominic, who was apparently drunk, said, "If she were prettier, I'd be more excited about marrying her," then laughed like it was just some hilarious joke. Kyler said a few of the guys called him out for the comment, but Dominic got defensive and said they couldn't take a joke. I sat in my car stunned and crying for 20 minutes. The man I loved, the man I was supposed to marry, had joked that my appearance was the reason he was hesitant to commit to me. When I finally walked inside, he was passed out on the couch, still in his clothes from earlier. The apartment smelled like stale beer. I took Beans into the bedroom and locked the door. Sunday morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee, Dominic's standard apology breakfast. He looked hungover and sheepish, clearly hoping food would make everything better. When I asked him about what Kyler told me, his face fell. He tried to downplay it, said he was drunk and being dumb, that he only said it to shut the guys up. His excuse of guys being guys made me feel worse. We fought. I told him how humiliated I felt, and he insisted he didn't mean it that way. He tried to blame the stress of wedding planning, the cost, the pressure, but all I could hear was the fact that he used my appearance as the punchline to a cruel joke. I couldn't stay. I grabbed my purse and left for my brother Elliot's place. Elliot has always been my safe space, my anchor during rough times. When I told him what happened, he was livid, ready to confront Dominic, but I talked him down. I just needed space and somewhere to breathe. The rest of Sunday, Dominic kept texting, apologizing, begging me to come home and talk. I only replied once. Anytime. I called in sick on Monday. There was no way I could sit at the dental office answering phones and pretending my heart hadn't just been broken. Around 9 a.m., I got a call from Valerie, Dominic's mom. We've always been close. Honestly, she's been more supportive of our relationship than my own mother, who now lives in Florida with husband number 3. Valerie sounded upset. She said Dominic called her last night and that there was something important I needed to know. She asked if I could meet her in person, And now, here I am, sitting in my car outside a coffee shop, waiting to meet Valerie in 15 minutes, wondering what more there is to know, wondering if my 5-year relationship is really over. I keep looking down at my engagement ring, wondering if I should have seen this coming. Was I blind, or did everything fall apart this quickly? And what on earth could Valerie possibly tell me that would make any of this okay? Update 1. First of all, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my original post. I didn't expect thousands of comments, and I tried to read as many as I could between crying sessions and stress eating the emergency Oreos from my brother's pantry. For those asking, yes, I met with Valerie, Dominic's mom, and I'll get to that at the end of this update. A lot has happened in the past 2 days, and I'm still trying to process everything. After posting on Monday, I called in sick again. My boss was surprisingly understanding. I've only used 2 sick days all year, and apparently I sounded like death on the phone. I spent most of the morning in Elliot's spare room/storage closet, scrolling through your comments and trying to gather my thoughts. Around noon, Lena came over on her lunch break with sandwiches from the deli near the hospital where she works. I hadn't really eaten since Sunday, so even though I wasn't hungry, I forced myself to take a few bites. Lena gently reminded me that I couldn't avoid Dominic forever. We lived together, had joint accounts, and eventually would need to talk. She was right, of course. I couldn't hide at my brother's place indefinitely, especially since Elliot's girlfriend was coming over that night. The last thing I wanted was to be the sad third wheel at their Taco Tuesday. After Lena left, I took a shower, borrowed one of Elliot's oversized hoodies, don't judge me, it was comforting, and drove back to the apartment. The whole way there, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. I wasn't going to yell, I wasn't going to cry. I was going to be calm, mature, and get answers. When I pulled into our parking spot, I noticed Dominic's truck was there. He should have been at work. My stomach twisted as I walked up the stairs to our second-floor unit. I unlocked the door and found him on the couch, wearing sweats, looking like he hadn't slept. He was surrounded by all the wedding planning binders I'd put together over the last 8 months. Beans was curled up beside him. Traitor. He looked surprised and kind of relieved to see me. When I asked why he wasn't at work, he said he'd taken some personal time. Apparently, he'd spent the morning going through everything, trying to figure out how he'd screwed things up so badly. I stayed by the door, not ready to sit next to him. I told him looking at wedding plans wasn't going to undo what he said. What followed was a long, difficult conversation. He apologized again for what he said at the bar, calling it inexcusable and claiming he didn't even believe it. When I asked why he would say something so cruel if it wasn't true, he said he was trying to look cool in front of his friends. That made me even angrier. I brought up the things he said during dinner before the bar incident, things he said while sober, and reminded him that he'd already expressed doubts about marrying me. He admitted to being stressed, about work, about Paul constantly telling horror stories about marriage, about the cost of the wedding. But instead of talking to me about any of it, he bottled it all up until it exploded in the worst possible way. Then he told me something new. He said he was afraid of turning into his father. Dominic almost never talks about him, a man who had an affair with a coworker, left when Dominic was 12 and moved to Arizona to start a new family. Dominic had always said it didn't affect him much, but now he admitted that he's terrified he might be predisposed to cheat or abandon someone the same way. I told him he wasn't his father. Genetics don't decide who you are in a relationship. His response hit hard. He said he didn't know if he could truly promise someone forever when forever had always seemed so impossible to him. When I asked if he had talked to anyone else about these fears, he hesitated before admitting he'd been talking to Kyler. Apparently, they'd gotten closer recently. Kyler had gone through a rough breakup and had been someone Dominic confided in. That's when it all clicked. Kyler already knew about Dominic's doubts, which is probably why he reached out to me after the bar incident. The conversation took another sharp turn when I asked him exactly what he had been feeling. His answer was honest, and it broke my heart. Scared, overwhelmed, uncertain. He said he loved me, but the more he thought about his parents, how they'd seemed happy until suddenly they weren't, the more afraid he became of repeating their pattern. I asked him why he didn't share all of this with me earlier. He said he was scared I'd take it as a sign he didn't love me enough. The irony hit me like a slap. By hiding his fears, he created the exact situation he wanted to avoid. I asked him point blank, were his doubts about marriage itself or about marrying me? He hesitated, and that pause told me everything. Eventually, he admitted that while most of his fears were about marriage and commitment, a part of him had started wondering whether we were even right for each other long term. That hurt more than the comment about my appearance. After 5 years together, he was still unsure if we were a match. I asked for specifics. He said we'd both changed, that I'd become more focused on planning, while I used to be more spontaneous, that he'd given up on starting his own business and didn't know who he was anymore. I pointed out that change is normal in relationships, but he asked whether we'd grown together or grown apart. By that point, I was emotionally exhausted. I told him I needed space, time to process everything, the public humiliation, his hidden doubts, and now, his uncertainty about our compatibility. He begged me to stay and said we could try therapy or counseling, but I stayed firm. I had to get out. As I was packing more clothes, he mentioned that my phone had been buzzing. I checked and saw 3 missed calls from Valerie. In the middle of everything, I'd forgotten our planned coffee meeting. When I told Dominic, his expression shifted, from confusion to concern. I said Valerie had called crying and wanted to talk after he spoke with her Sunday night. He went pale and wouldn't look me in the eyes. I asked him what he'd told her. He vaguely said they argued and he shared some doubts, but his avoidance made me suspicious. When I pushed harder, he said it wasn't his place to explain, that I needed to hear it directly from her. I stepped outside to call Valerie. She picked up immediately and said she was worried when I didn't show. I explained I was at the apartment talking with Dominic, and she insisted we meet. Immediately. Her voice sounded different, almost strained, especially when I mentioned being with Dominic. That only increased my suspicion that something was seriously wrong. We arranged to meet in 30 minutes. Before I left, I asked Dominic one more time what his mom knew that I didn't. He finally looked up at me, his expression full of guilt and resignation. He said there was something he should have told me himself, and that whatever happened, he'd be gone by the time I returned if that's what I wanted. I packed enough clothes for a week, plus toiletries and my laptop. At the door, he told me he loved me. I replied, sometimes love isn't enough. On my way to meet Valerie, I got a call from Karina, Dominic's sister. She sounded worried and asked what was going on. She said she'd heard about the bar incident from Paul and that Dominic wasn't answering her texts. She also said their mom had been upset. I told her I was on the way to meet Valerie. That's when Karina asked, is it about Maria? That name hit me like a freight train. I froze. What about Maria? I asked. Karina realized she'd said something she wasn't supposed to. She quickly apologized and told me I needed to hear it from Valerie. No matter how much I pressed, she wouldn't say more. As I pulled into the coffee shop parking lot, I saw Valerie already sitting by the window. Her eyes were red, puffy, and tired. Whatever she was about to tell me, I knew it was going to change everything. Just as I reached the door, my phone buzzed with a text from Dominic. Whatever my mom tells you, please remember that I do love you. I just got scared and made terrible mistakes. I'll understand if you can't forgive me. I put my phone away, took a deep breath, and walked to Valerie's table. Update 2. I haven't been able to respond to many, but please know I've read them and truly appreciate the advice. I'm writing this now from a new location, Lena's apartment. After meeting with Valerie yesterday, I couldn't bring myself to go back to Elliot's or our apartment. Lena has a pull-out couch that's slightly more comfortable than Elliot's storage room futon, and her cat Pepper doesn't judge me for crying into a bowl of cereal at 2 a.m. So, the meeting with Valerie. Where do I even start? The coffee shop was surprisingly busy for a Tuesday afternoon. A nearby community college had just let out, and students with laptops filled most of the tables. Valerie had managed to grab a corner booth, the kind with high backs that give at least the illusion of privacy. She looked different than the last time I saw her, at our monthly family dinner 3 weeks ago. Her perfectly styled bob was slightly disheveled, and for the first time in 5 years of knowing her, she wasn't wearing any makeup. It wasn't vanity. Makeup was just part of her daily rhythm, like how some people can't start their day without coffee. When I arrived, she stood up to hug me, and she smelled like those lavender dryer sheets she always uses. I ordered a black coffee, even though what I really wanted was one of those sugary caramel drinks with extra whipped cream. Somehow, it felt wrong to order something indulgent for this kind of conversation. After a bit of awkward small talk, Valerie got straight to the point. Dominic had called her Sunday night in the middle of an emotional meltdown. While she acknowledged that his fears about commitment and turning into his father were very real, she said there was something else, something much more immediate, driving his behavior. One word, Maria. I nearly choked on my coffee. Maria, the new project coordinator at Dominic's company. The woman he'd mentioned casually a few times, always in passing. As Valerie continued, nervously shredding a napkin into confetti, she told me Dominic had developed feelings for Maria over the last few months. According to him, nothing physical had happened. At least that's what he told his mother. But there was an emotional connection, one strong enough to make him question everything about our relationship. I sat there trying to absorb her words, while the coffee shop felt like it was tilting sideways. I mentally started building a timeline. Maria joined Dominic's company around New Year's. I had met her briefly at the company's holiday party in March. By then, Dominic had already begun acting different, distant, glued to his phone, always out with work friends. What I had dismissed as stress from a big project suddenly looked like something else entirely. I asked Valerie why she was telling me this, why she wasn't just protecting her son. Her eyes welled up, and everything became clear when she started sharing more about her own marriage. Before Dominic's dad left her for a coworker and moved to Arizona to start over, there had been months of distance, arguments that didn't make sense, subtle ways of disconnecting without saying the truth out loud. She didn't want that to happen again. Didn't want me to be left in the dark while Dominic took the coward's way out. Suddenly, the comment at the bar made more sense. It wasn't just drunken stupidity. It was a subconscious sabotage, an attempt to destroy our relationship so he wouldn't have to make the hard choice himself. Valerie and I talked for over an hour. She opened up about how she'd tried to save her marriage even after learning about the affair, how she'd blamed herself for not being enough. Before we said goodbye in the parking lot, she said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about. The hardest lesson I ever learned is that you can't make someone choose you. They either do or they don't, and anything in between is just delaying the inevitable. I sat in my car afterward for a long time, staring at my phone. Dominic had texted me 3 times, all variations of "I'm sorry" and "I love you," but not one single mention of Maria, still hiding the full truth. Instead of responding, I called Lena and asked if I could crash at her place. She didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions, just said she was already setting up the pull-out couch and offered to grab dinner on her way home. That's the kind of friend everyone needs when the world's falling apart. Later that night, I finally texted Dominic back. I know about Maria. Don't contact me again until you're ready to tell me the complete truth. I'll be collecting more of my things tomorrow while you're at work. Then I blocked his number. Not forever, just for the night. I needed space. I needed to think without being pulled back in by excuses or half-truths. On the drive to Lena's, Karina called. The conversation confirmed what Valerie had told me and added another layer I hadn't known. Karina had overheard Dominic and Paul discussing the situation last Thursday. She confronted Dominic and made him promise to be honest with me after the weekend. Clearly, that promise meant nothing. What surprised me most was how firmly Karina stood by me. Even though she's Dominic's sister, she made it clear she was on my side. That moment of solidarity meant more than she'll ever know. I hadn't just lost a partner. I was terrified of losing his family too, people who had become mine over the years. Lena's apartment was exactly what I needed that night, a neutral space where I didn't have to explain myself. We ate dinner sitting on the living room floor. Her coffee table was covered in papers from her online classes, and we half-watched some baking competition neither of us cared about. The normalcy was a lifeline, something small, steady, and unaffected by the chaos inside me. After Lena went to bed, I stayed up scrolling through old photos on my phone. 5 years of memories with Dominic, vacations, birthdays, lazy Sundays, blurry selfies on random afternoons. Our engagement photos, where we smiled like two people who had no idea what was coming. I started making a mental checklist for tomorrow. Swing by the apartment while he's at work, pack more of my stuff, maybe talk to the landlord about ending our lease early. That's when my phone buzzed with a new message. An unknown number. Margot, this is Maria. I know you blocked Dominic. Can we meet tomorrow? There's more to the story that you should know. Just the two of us. I stared at the message, heart pounding. More? What more could there possibly be? And why would she want to tell me directly? After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, I typed my reply. Where and when? Update 3 first. Thank you all for the overwhelming support on my previous posts. I've spent countless sleepless nights reading through your comments, and they've helped more than I can explain. For those asking how I'm doing, I'm surviving. Some moments are easier than others, but I'm still here, breathing, one day at a time. The meeting with Maria happened, and it went nothing like I expected. We met at a small breakfast spot near the park. Neutral territory, I guess. She was already there when I arrived, nervously scrolling through her phone. She looked different from the polished woman I remembered from the company party. Her hair was pulled back into a messy bun, her makeup minimal. If she had been secretly involved in some emotional affair with my fiancé, I imagine she would have looked more sure of herself. But instead, she looked uncomfortable, anxious, and very human. She kept fidgeting with her coffee cup, barely making eye contact. And then came 2 bombshells. First, Maria had no idea Dominic had developed feelings for her. She only found out when Paul mentioned it in passing last week. According to her, she and Dominic had worked together closely on a project, occasionally texting about work after hours, but never inappropriately. She showed me their message history. It was dry, professional, the occasional meme about construction life. Nothing flirty, nothing crossing lines. She even had a boyfriend of 3 years who sometimes joined them for after-work hangouts. The second revelation was about Paul. Maria had overheard him at work, not just encouraging Dominic to explore his options, but specifically telling him she might be a better match. According to her, Paul had been stirring things up for weeks, making comments about Dominic being trapped, losing his freedom, questioning whether he really wanted to get married. At work, Paul was telling everyone Dominic was getting cold feet and that marriage would ruin his life. The picture became painfully clear. Dominic, already vulnerable, had been nudged over the edge by someone he trusted. By the end of our meeting, I didn't feel angry at Maria. I felt calm. She wasn't the villain I'd imagined. Just another person caught in the crossfire of Dominic's fear and Paul's toxicity. Before we parted, she looked me in the eye and said something I'll never forget. You seem like someone who knows their worth. Don't let anyone make you question it. I left with a new perspective. And a plan. This wasn't just about Dominic and me anymore. It was about toxic friendships, inherited fear, emotional avoidance, and how I fit into all of it. I texted Karina afterward, asking if she'd help arrange a family meeting. I wasn't ready to be alone with Dominic, but I needed a space to speak openly. She agreed immediately. That brings me to yesterday's dinner. Karina hosted it at her apartment, small but warm and full of the kind of energy only she can create. She ordered from that Italian place near her building. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad. Valerie arrived first, then Paul. Karina insisted he attend, and finally Dominic, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. The first 20 minutes were excruciating. We made small talk about the weather, Karina's new coffee table, pretending like the weight of everything wasn't sitting in the center of the table next to the garlic bread. No one wanted to be the one to say it out loud. Then Valerie broke the silence with a quiet but firm reminder. We're not here for dinner. We're here to face what's been happening. That opened the floodgates. I told them everything Maria had shared with me. I watched Paul carefully as I spoke. His face shifted from confusion to defensiveness. He tried to interrupt, said he was just looking out for his friend. But Karina shut him down fast. Dominic mostly stayed quiet, eyes fixed on his untouched pasta. When I addressed him directly, he admitted that Maria had never done anything to lead him on. She was just friendly, and he let it grow into something else because he was afraid. Afraid of becoming his dad. Valerie visibly flinched at that. When I brought up the joke at the bar, Dominic looked ashamed. He said it had nothing to do with Maria. It was him being a coward. Paul had been egging him on, making cracks about him being whipped, and instead of defending our relationship, he threw me under the bus to look cool. It wasn't about your looks, he said. It was never about that. Paul tried to dismiss it as guy talk. Karina, fed up, reminded everyone that the wedding was in 3 months. 3 months. That hit me like a punch. Save the dates had gone out. Deposits had been paid. My dress, the one I'd picked with Lena by my side, was hanging in her closet waiting for its final alterations. I stared at the table and quietly said the words I'd been turning over in my head for days. I don't think the wedding is happening anymore. Silence. Dominic started to protest, but I stopped him. I explained that I'd spent the last week trying to figure out how we got here, and what I realized was this. It wasn't about Maria, or a joke, or even Paul. It was about Dominic not being honest with himself, or with me. I told them how I'd ignored the red flags for months, his detachment, his lack of interest in planning, his emotional distance. I'd made excuses because facing the truth was too painful. But the truth was this. I deserve someone who doesn't need a family intervention to figure out how they feel about me. Paul made a snide comment about me being dramatic. Valerie and Karina responded in unison. Shut up. Dominic said he still loved me, that he was just scared. I reminded him that he already had messed everything up. We talked for hours. Tears, tension, truth, especially between Karina and Paul. Old wounds got reopened. New ones came to the surface. And around midnight, we reached the conclusion we'd all seen coming. The wedding was off. There was no yelling, no drama, just a heavy, shared understanding that something between us had cracked, and trust like that doesn't fix itself in 3 months. Not with Maria still working beside him, not with the echo of that bar comment still ringing in my head. Karina drove me back to Lena's afterward. She promised, again, that this didn't change how she or Valerie felt about me. I was still family. When I got back to the apartment, I sat in the dark, alone on the pull-out couch, letting the reality settle. 5 years? Gone. Wedding canceled. Future? Unknown. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I opened the notes app on my phone and made a list. Call venue. Cancel. Deposit equals gone. Return ring. Contact guests. Move out. Update social media. It was past 2 a.m. when Lena came out of her room, rubbing her eyes. She sat beside me, no questions, just wrapped an arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that until the sky started turning gray. Not talking, just existing. This morning, I woke up to a text from Dominic. He wants to meet to discuss practical matters. The apartment, our joint accounts, what to do with the furniture. It felt so adult, so final. Elliot texted too, asking when I wanted help packing. My mom, who somehow already knew, probably thanks to a cousin who follows Karina on Instagram, wanted to know if she should cancel her flight. I haven't answered yet. The ring feels heavy on my hand now. I've been twisting it without realizing, some nervous habit I didn't know I had. It's a simple ring, a round diamond in a white gold setting. Classic. Just like our relationship. That's what he'd said. The irony isn't lost on me. I called the venue this morning. The coordinator was kind, but the answer was firm. The $8,000 deposit is non-refundable this close to the date. A year of saving, gone. The logical side of me cringes at the waist. The emotional side doesn't care. Karina texted later. Her friend is a photographer who might be able to transfer our deposit to a future event. Valerie offered to help notify relatives. Small kindnesses in the middle of a quiet storm. Paul sent a non-apology. These things happen for a reason. You'll find someone better. I deleted it. No reply. Maria sent a short message, expressing regret. I believe her. She's just collateral in all this, a projection of Dominic's fear and Paul's manipulation. The hardest part is the little reminders, the wedding binder still in my tote bag, the shared Spotify playlist we made for the reception, the honeymoon folder on my laptop, fragments of a future that doesn't exist anymore. Lena suggested I take a mental health day, but I went into work. Filing insurance claims felt easier than overthinking everything alone. My coworkers were mercifully normal, either unaware or politely pretending not to notice the absence of a ring. Tomorrow, I'll meet Dominic at a coffee shop to exchange keys and talk about the lease. He's agreed to move out since my name's on it. Another task in the quiet business of ending a relationship. Last month, we were sampling cake flavors. Now we're splitting the kitchenware. I keep thinking about something Valerie said at dinner. Endings are rarely clean or perfect. Most of the time, they're messy and sad and complicated. She would know. She rebuilt after her own heartbreak, raised 2 kids alone, found joy again, eventually. Looking at her now, you'd never guess what she survived. Maybe that's the hope I need. For now, I'm taking it day by day. Tomorrow I'll handle the apartment. Next week, I'll start looking for a new place. The future beyond that is blurry, but at least it exists. Karina just texted, asking if I want to grab coffee this weekend. She mentioned that her family friend Kenzo has a cabin he's offering me for a quiet weekend away. I haven't decided if I'll take it. Part of me wants to escape. Another part knows I need my people. Lena, with her quiet support. Elliot, with his protective big brother energy. Valerie and Karina, still standing by me. I know one thing for sure. I won't be checking my wedding countdown app anymore. I won't be practicing my signature with his last name. That future is gone. And while I still don't know what comes next, I'm starting to believe something will. Last update. It feels strange to be writing this final update for my new apartment. It's been 3 months since the family dinner that ended my engagement. 3 months of quietly, sometimes painfully, putting my life back together in ways I never expected. Some of you have reached out asking for an update, and I figured I owed it. To you, to myself. So here it is. The good, the bad, and the unexpected. Let's start with the practical stuff. Dominic moved out of our shared apartment within a week of the breakup. Elliot and Lena came over to help me pack his things while he was at work. We labeled everything neatly and left it in the living room for him to collect. It felt surreal, dividing 5 years of shared life into his and mine. The coffee maker I gave him for his birthday, the throw blanket we picked out on a trip to that little mountain town, the framed photos we'd hung in every room. Afterward, the apartment felt hollow, like a stage set stripped of its actors. I lasted 2 more weeks before I begged the lease manager to let me out of the contract with 1 extra month's rent. Worth it, just to escape the ghosts. Finding a new place wasn't easy. The rental market is brutal, and my budget as a newly single person was significantly tighter. I eventually found a small 1-bedroom across town. It's further from work, but it has a tiny balcony where I've started growing herbs in dollar store pots. The basil keeps dying. The mint is somehow thriving, against all odds. I choose to see that as symbolic. Finances have been an adjustment. All the shared expenses, car insurance, streaming services, groceries, now fall solely on me. I've become that person who uses coupons, buys store brands, and tracks every expense in a spreadsheet. I hesitate before ordering takeout. Adulthood, I guess. Not the version I imagined at 29, but here we are. Most of the wedding vendors were surprisingly kind. The venue kept our deposit, but they sent a sincere note wishing me happiness. The florist refunded half, even though their policy said no refunds. The DJ gave me his brother's number. Apparently he's a therapist. An unexpected but thoughtful gesture. The engagement ring sits in its original box, tucked away in my dresser. Dominic said I should keep it or sell it, that it was bad karma for him to take it back. I still haven't decided. Some days I forget it's there. Other days I take it out and stare at it, wondering how something so small could once represent something so big. Social media was its own kind of hell. I waited 2 weeks before changing my relationship status, dreading the inevitable flood of questions. I finally did it at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. The notifications rolled in anyway. What happened? Texts from well-meaning friends, prayers from distant relatives, former classmates I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly sliding into my DMs with faux concern that felt more like curiosity. I posted a brief, vague statement about mutual decisions and requested privacy. Then I muted my notifications and tossed my phone across the couch. Later, I shared a photo of my new apartment keys with the caption, "New Beginnings." It got fewer likes than our engagement announcement, but felt infinitely more real. As for Dominic, we've only spoken a few times since the breakup, mostly about boring logistics. Mail sent to the wrong place, the shared cloud storage account we forgot to separate, returning an air fryer to his sister. Every conversation has been civil but hollow, like strangers stuck in an elevator trying to make small talk. He's still working at the same company, still friends with Paul, though Karina says that relationship's starting to crack. Still living with his cousin, apparently. Karina also told me that things with Maria got awkward after the breakup. She requested a transfer and has kept her distance from Dominic since learning the full story. The biggest surprise came last month when Dominic texted asking if we could meet. We hadn't seen each other in person since the key exchange. I was hesitant, curious, but cautious. We met at a coffee shop near my new place. Neutral territory, as Lena half joked, with plenty of witnesses. He looked different, thinner, tired, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. The first 10 minutes were awkward. Weather, work, nothing real. Then he pulled out a journal. "I've been seeing someone," he said. My heart stuttered for a second, until he clarified. A therapist. The journal was part of his treatment. Daily reflections, notes on his patterns, his behavior. He said he'd been digging into his relationship with his dad, his dynamic with Paul, the way he treated me. He didn't ask for forgiveness or reconciliation. He just wanted me to know he was trying to be better. "I should have done this years ago," he admitted. "Maybe things would have been different." It was the most self-aware I've ever seen him. And honestly, I hoped therapy would help him. Not for me. That ship has long sailed. But because I can't imagine carrying all that unresolved trauma forever. Before we parted, he said he'd heard I was still close with Karina and his mom. "I'm glad," he said. "They need good people in their lives." That's been one of the strangest parts of the breakup, staying close with his family while disconnecting from him. Valerie still texts me weekly, memes, garden photos, little check-ins. Karina and I have brunch every other Sunday at a diner halfway between our apartments. They've been careful, respectful, never oversharing about Dominic, never crossing boundaries, just being there. And I love them for it. As for me, I wish I could say I've had some massive breakthrough, that I've found myself, or unlocked some profound truth. The reality is messier. Some days I feel free, grateful I didn't marry someone who could hurt me so carelessly. Other days, usually when the hot water stops working or I need help reaching the top shelf, I miss the practical comforts of partnership. I started therapy too, not just because of the breakup, but because it opened my eyes to how much I'd compromised myself in that relationship. How many red flags I ignored because they were wrapped in routine. How often I made space for Dominic's insecurities while quietly shrinking my own needs. My therapist said healing isn't always about becoming someone new. Sometimes it's about remembering who you were before you started making yourself small. I've started hiking again on Saturday mornings. Something I used to love but stopped doing because Dominic didn't like early wake-ups. Dating? Still a far-off idea. My coworkers keep trying to set me up with this really great guy. Maybe in a few months. Maybe not. Right now, I'm still figuring out how to be fully comfortable in my own company. The most unexpected thing came from the saddest task, canceling the honeymoon. We'd booked a 10-day cottage on the coast, non-refundable. For weeks, I ignored the confirmation emails, unable to face losing that money too. Then Lena suggested something radical. Take the trip anyway, alone. You've never traveled solo, she said. Maybe it's time. At first, it sounded like the setup for a sad indie film. 10 days alone in a romantic cottage for two. But the longer I thought about it, the more it made sense. No compromise, no expectations. I could wake up whenever I wanted, read a whole book in one sitting, explore on my own terms. So, next week, I'm going. Alone. I've packed 3 paperbacks, downloaded a stack of podcasts, and even bought a new swimsuit. One I chose entirely for comfort, not how it would look to someone else. My mom thinks I'm nuts. Elliot offered to tag along for part of the trip. I declined. Karina suggested I download a dating app. Maybe. Probably not. I don't know what I'll find on this non-honeymoon. Maybe clarity. Maybe more questions. Probably a sunburn. Definitely peace. Hopefully, a little freedom. The other day, I was grocery shopping when our old song came on over the speakers. 3 months ago, I would have run for the frozen food aisle to cry. This time, I just paused. Felt a small pang. Like pressing on a bruise that's mostly healed. Progress. Not perfection. I don't have it all figured out. My shower temperature still fluctuates wildly. I killed another basil plant yesterday. Sometimes, I still grab my phone to text Dominic something funny before I remember. We don't do that anymore. And yet, I'm okay.